eyes will more often go up to right or left than the auditory will kinesthetic. Okay. The kinesthetics will almost always go down to one side or the other, and the auditory will go to one side or the other. How many of you have heard this before? Anybody? Okay,
You mean
good.
when they're thinking or what?
Yeah, when they're thinking, when you're talking to them,
And kinesthetic goes what way?
down
Down and
to one side or the other, and auditory will go to the side. Now, the reason they do that is because visual is looking up for a picture. When you access memories in your mind, there are pictures in your mind. And it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're auditory, kinesthetic, or visual, it doesn't matter. If you're accessing a picture, you're going to look up.
So visual is up.
Visual is up. And an auditory, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, you're going to look to the side. And the reason for that is because your mind is saying, I have to kind of look towards my ear to get the sound. That's the way our minds work. Okay, so you look to one side or the other, almost to find out how it's going to sound. And then the kinesthetic is looking down, and what they're doing is they're more accessing their feelings down here. They might get a picture, but they might go up and then go down because that picture helped them access their feelings the way they felt about it. Did you? Sure. Feel free. And so what happens then is anybody can do that. In fact, what we have is when we ask somebody a question and they don't know the answer, their eyes will do a full circle, one way or the other, or back and forth or whatever, until they get the answer. If they have to make it up or whatever. Okay. And the reason for that is because they don't know whether it makes them feel good or bad or how it sounds or what it looks like, because they don't know the answer, and so they're doing this, what we call a transnervational search. They're going all the way around their brain trying to find the answer, and it's not there. And so if they're more kinesthetic, they're going to look down to the right. And the reason for that is, this is knowledge, but the reason for that is because what they're doing is they're creating a new feeling. And if they're auditory, it's going to go to the right, to the almost level, because they're creating a new sound, a new logical explanation for it. And if they're visual, they're going to go up to the right and they're going to create the picture of the answer. That's your creative side. That's where your eyes go. Okay? And on the left side is your memory side. Okay, so if you remember it, so for instance, if I asked you, what would your mother look like with green hair? And you're going, I don't know. Okay, you get the idea? You'd be looking for that picture. I don't know what she looked like with green hair. But if I asked you, what would it make you feel like if I scratched your car? Then, if it's happened to you before, you might go like this. Or if it's never happened before, you might go like this and go. Okay. Get the idea?
No.
No? Who said that?
You pointed towards the same side. Your eyes didn't change though when you were giving the example.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better? Left is the memory side. Right is the creative side. Now don't practice this in the mirror because your eyes will mess you up in the mirror. Look at other people. The mirrors, remember, opposite. They're what you're doing, just the opposite.
Left is the creative side, and right is the...
Right is the creative side. That's, if I look to the right, I'm creating something. Now this isn't always true because I've met people who are built backwards, and I don't know why that is. But I have a friend who is definitely, and one of the factors on it is left-handed people are almost always backwards. And I have a friend who's definitely right-handed, definitely right-sided, but his creative side is not over here. It's over here. And I've talked to him about it, and I says, no wonder I didn't like you when I first met you. You can't see straight.
Okay, so right is creative and left
is your memory. Now, what you can do with this, though, is once you know somebody real well, you'll know whether they're lying to you or not just by watching their eyes, because their eyes are the window to their soul.
If they're being creative while they're talking.
That's right.
That means they're lying.
That's right. I asked a lady a question one time. I was in this meeting with this lady, and she was being very deceptive. And so I asked her a question that was just real, almost impossible for her to answer about what we were negotiating on. And boy, her eyes were just doing this full circle for about 3 minutes. It just went on and on and on. And finally she came up with this answer and I'm going, gosh, I mean, I couldn't even believe it then. It just, it wasn't real. But it was the only answer she could come up with. So kind of keep that in mind. After eyes. Now keep in mind, now the eyes are not the only thing you can look at because eyes are sometimes deceptive. If you don't know what the person's really like. If you don't know which side they favor or which pattern they favor. Okay, what's that? Listen. When a visual listens to you, they're looking at you. When an auditory is listening to you, I have a friend who's an auditory, and we'll go to a restaurant, we'll sit across from each other, and the whole time he's looking the other way. I think I told you about it last week. He's looking away. He doesn't care to see me because he can hear me just fine without looking at me. Remember I told you he's looking at the waitress walking by? Well, she might even be ugly. It might be a guy, but he's looking away from me because he can hear me and his eyes don't have any effect on it. Where the visual has to look at you to listen to you. I can't hear you unless if I'm a visual. I can't hear you at all unless I'm looking at you. I had a meeting with a guy who was totally visual, and the whole time he had his glass around his office, and the whole time he's looking out like this, and I said, he's watching everything that's going on out in the office. Finally, I stopped and I said, Jack, I said, is there a problem? And he went, excuse me? I hadn't heard a thing I said. Don't you? I don't hear you. Okay, the kinesthetic, they might look at you and they may not. In fact, they may look a little bit dazed when they're looking at you. We're not talking about you. And the reason they do that is because
They're thinking of 12 other things.
that's right. They are. They really are.
But they're still hearing you.
And they're still hearing you.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
He really does.
It takes about 5 minutes for him to answer though.
You know why? You know why that is? It's because his mind has, we'll get more into this about the kinesthetic. I'll tell you right now. The kinesthetic can think about more things than one at a time. He's not like the visual and the auditory. The auditory is the worst. The auditory can only think of, if they're doing their taxes, that's all they can do. If they're buying a house, that's all they can do. If they're selling a house, that's all they can do. They have to be totally focused. But the kinesthetic can do everything at once. I bet you could do 10 things at one time.
He can talk on the phone and hear us talking out here.
Yeah, he'll hear a joke across the room while he's on the phone. Say, hold on.
You see, the kinesthetic has some real assets. Now that's the asset of the kinesthetic.
Some real drawbacks.
That's the drawbacks, and we'll talk about those in just a minute.
No, I'm leaving.
If somebody's auditory, or if somebody's looking at you, it doesn't necessarily mean they're visual. I mean they need some input because they can't hear very well.
That's right. Yeah, okay, now let's go on to the next one is,
Listen, attention.
after listening is attention. If they're really paying attention to you, visuals, and he can't quite hear you, visuals gonna go. Now that's a little exaggerated, but I've done that. You know, when my kids are whispering off in the background, I'm going. And I know I can hear them when I focus in on them with my eyes. Okay, an auditory on
You
the other
always
hand.
read lips, right?
An auditory on the other hand is going to hear the kids whispering off in the corner, and he's going to go. And the kinesthetic is going to go. Gotta get in there. The auditory's got to get right there. If you can't hear it, you got to get up there. In fact, this isn't on there, but this is bonus for you. Okay. The kinesthetic usually has. Remember, in some classes you've had where people have said, "Don't get too close to others and don't stand too far away." We didn't talk about that on Matching and Marrying, but we should have, because some people, they don't want you to get too close. Now, if I get too close, you're gonna start noticing it in her face. See if I'm in trouble. Anyway, if I get within her circle, I'm in trouble. If it's not with her, it's my wife. Okay. But anyway, if you get too close to somebody, well, the kinesthetic is usually going to have a smaller circle than the visual or the auditory. The visuals could be broad and not want you in within 10 feet of them. But that's usually the auditory, because the auditory, remember, they don't want any body contact at all. They don't even want to shake your hand. So they don't want you too close. if you're clear over in that corner over there, that's just fine for them. Okay, what's next?
Here,
Hearing, that's what we're talking about. If remember, when if they're hearing you, they're going like this.
question.
Okay, questions. When you ask them questions, the visual will answer questions almost ad nauseum. If you ask me a question about where I got my last speeding ticket, I could tell you, and probably would tell you, in fact I'm going to tell you, no. Every detail of the whole situation from the time I left the house until I got home 3 days later. Okay, that's the visual. They've got this picture in their mind, and they've got to tell you the whole thing. It's probably a movie, and it's running. Yeah, yeah. Okay, and I got to tell you the whole thing if I'm a visual. Okay, and an auditory is if you say on that trip, and you're talking to an auditory, and they say, yeah, did you get a speeding ticket? They go, yeah. That's all you get. That's all you get.
You'd think an auditory would talk.
Well, except that, you know what they like? They like other people to talk, because then
Oh,
they can
like
hear
to
them.
hear it.
So,
Okay, so what you're saying is the visual, they can care less about others talking.
yeah, because
They're
they're gonna
motor
talk on forever. And in fact, if you notice, most public speakers are visuals. Guys that do what I'm doing, most of us are visuals, and the reason is because we love to talk. We don't care what anybody else is doing, we love to talk. You could be out in the parking lot, and I'd still continue talking. Please don't, though. I care. Okay, but the kinesthetic, now when you ask a kinesthetic question and they're answering you, their answers are going to be based on the way it makes them feel. If they got a ticket, a speeding ticket on this trip, and they're really emotional about it, I have to tell you, my son-in-law wrecked his car. I'll tell you about that. And he was so irate, he was pounding and ranting and raving. It wasn't his fault. The reason he got in a wreck was because the road was in the way. And then the road had snow on it, and it was icy, and it was all the fault of the road crew. That's it. Okay. When I was saying, like a father-in-law would go on trying to persuade a judge that it's the road crew's fault. Okay. It's your fault, because you were driving too fast. Okay. And an auditory would have just said, I got in a wreck. That's all you would have gotten at. I got in a wreck. Okay. So when you ask questions, this is, remember you were taught, ask questions that are what, open-ended and closed-end? Ask open-ended questions if you want some information. If you don't want any information, if all you want is a yes or no, you ask them a yes or no question. You ask them a closed-end question. Did you get a ticket? Yes. Did you get a ticket? No. Did you have fun? Yes. Do you want to buy this house? No. Okay. But if you want an open-ended question, if you're really still trying to find out what they really need, are there specific colors that you would like your living room to be? And then they go, oh yeah, I'm like beige, or, you know, and they start listing them. But you know what? If they're a visual, they'll go, but you know what? These other colors would go with myself, you know, and they'll go wrong forever. They'll do this mind dump, and you won't have enough paper to take it all in. Okay.
Yes.
Next, what's next?
Education.
Education. The visuals. Remember how the visuals sat? Very erect, very proper. What did they teach you in school? That the better your posture is when you sit, the longer you'll be able to sit. The visuals get the best education. The auditories, they sit okay, not real well, but I mean better than the kinesthetic. And so they get a pretty good education. And the kinesthetics usually, now this isn't always, but usually get not as good an education. And the reason for that is because they just can't stand sitting in that chair. It's uncomfortable. And even if it is a comfortable chair, they don't want to sit there. Because they want to go out and do something else. Okay, so they get not as good an education. And the next one on there should be occupation. Okay, occupation. And the reason for occupations is twofold. One is because of their education. If they got a bad education or a lower grade of education, then their occupation is not going to be one that demands a lot of education for them. You're not hardly ever going to see a kinesthetic doctor or a kinesthetic lawyer. You're going to see visuals and auditories in those positions. The reason? Because they had to sit in that chair for hour after day after week after year to get those education. And so they get better education and occupations. The second reason for getting a different job would be because that's what fits your personality based on your sensei representation. Remember, if you're a visual, you see things. These are going to be the photographers, the cameramen, the actors, actresses, the salespeople. Most salespeople are visual. And the auditories are going to be your accountants, tax people. They're the bankers, the ones that we all hate, but we have to have them because they keep us in line. Without them, the whole world would go down too. And the kinesthetic are generally, but not always, they're the ones that they have a lower education, and so they're the blue-collar workers. They're the ones who are doing the manual labor and working in the grocery stores most of the time. Okay, now that's not always. And I'm going to tell you how you can change your personality later if you want to change. Okay, next. Verbiage. The visual will speak in terms of the things they see. For instance, if I ask you a question like, let me think of a question. No, I can't think of a good question, so I'll just tell you what the answer would be. I'll tell you the answer, and then you tell me the question. That looks good to me. Yeah. That looks good to me. They'll answer in things that relate to visual things. Like, that looks good to me, or I see what you mean, or sounds good. Now that's an auditory.
Oh, I got that.
Okay, an auditory is going to do things that relate to the sound. That looks good to me, or that sounds good to me, or what else? They're real good with numbers and logic, so they'll say something like, well, that really figures. Oh, I can figure that out. Okay. And a kinesthetic is going to use terms that relate to the way they feel, like, well, I feel really good about that. Do you ever say that?
Well, when I get off my shopping, my job at night in the warehouse. In the grocery store.
Seeing himself.
No, do I ever say I feel good about that? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is pretty emotional.
very emotional.
Oh
Pretty
God.
emotional
And he
guy.
can't sit still, he said, at everybody's
Insensitive.
desk. He doesn't even have a desk, I would think, do you?
Okay,
Well, let's go on. Let's pick on some of the other personalities.
we're
Some
gonna.
of these auditory people.
Okay, some of these
Are
auditory.
you feeling irritated?
Well, it'd be nice to know. I mean, if you guys have me all figured out, I'd like to know what you guys are.
Well, the only reason we pick on you is because we do like you.
I know. Yeah.
Well,
I'm
because
not
and
for-
everything shows on you. Everything that you
Even you, Roxanna.
She's auditory.
She's so whatever that touchy thing is.
It's
What's
as
next?
you can make.
That's learning. Oh, learning. Oh, yeah, learning. I couldn't figure out why I put that on there. The way they learn is different. A visual will learn by seeing something done, or by taking a class. When I learned to ski, when I was about 12 years old, I never took a lesson in my life. And I used to be, not as good a skier now, but I used to be an excellent skier, and I was on ski patrol at a resort in Utah years ago. I used to be an excellent skier, and I've never taken a class. But I watched people ski. In fact, we took our camera. We used to have one of those Super 8 cameras. We took that up the mountains with us, and we shot pictures of good skiers. We didn't take any bad pictures because we didn't want those in our mind. Okay, and that's how we learned, was by watching other people ski. And that's the way visuals like to do things: take a class or see it done. An auditory will like to read about it, or maybe have it explained to them. And the kinesthetic, they're the
Just
worst.
can't do it.
I didn't say that.
You were ready
I didn't say that. What I was going to say.
They
is-
hire somebody.
They hire somebody to
somebody.
do No,
But
the
to have
kines,
someone to teach them?
no, just to
ski
do
for
it,
them.
whatever
Oh,
it
to
is.
ski
Just
for
ski for them. So what I was gonna say was that the kinesthetic just jumps in and tries it.
Oh.
Okay.
And breaks his leg.
Breaks his legs.
Arms.
Go to the lodge and have.
You ever, yeah, sit and have a beer.
For hot chocolate.
Now, what happens then on Christmas Eve when all of these kinesthetic dads get these new trikes and stuff for their kids, and they put them together and it's wrong, and then they take it apart and they put it together again and it's wrong, and they take it apart and Okay, these are the kinesthetics.
That's me.
Because they don't wanna read those instructions, who cares, I'm not gonna do this, right?
Right.
And sometimes they get it right the first time, and they go, see, I told you. But the auditory would never do that. They will always read the instructions, always. And
The visual, they
visuals-
want to see pictures on the instructions.
Actually, in fact, what's next? Is that on?
Relax.
Relax, okay. When we get to reading, we'll talk about that. Relaxing. Visuals like to relax in a special way. They'll go to the movies or to the theater. Auditories will go to symphonies. Visuals hardly ever go to symphonies. And the reason is because they're,
There's nothing to see.
excuse me?
There's nothing to see.
There's nothing to see. Right. And auditories will almost never go to the theater. They'd rather go to the symphony because they can hear it all just fine. They get this whole ensemble and it's done. And the kinesthetic, what do? They just go out and play some hoops or something, wouldn't you?
Would you?
Fishing.
Basketball.
Fishing.
Oh.
Basketball.
Fishing's okay.
Okay, fishing is, or something physical, something that takes the whole body to do. You might be a great armchair quarterback, but I bet you'd really rather play.
No.
Well, yeah.
See, he's starting to fit this pattern, isn't he?
Some,
Exciting, dude.
Or some of it, now,
I'd also love to go see a symphony, or listen to a symphony.
I don't see this.
No.
On the radio?
So kinesthetic.
I would, I like to watch the violin things go up at all at once.
Oh, so that is kind of a neat picture.
But no, I mean, I would enjoy to go see that, so that's where you have deviations.
That's right, you do. We're all a little bit deviant.
Kinesthetic with visual tendencies.
Yeah, don't
Okay.
take your clothes off.
Pervert tendency.
You should work on Steve, work on Steve.
Parties.
Work on me.
When visuals go to parties, they'd rather host the party than go to a party at someone else's house.
So true.
But only if they have it catered, because they don't want it to look like they did a thing. They want to look like they're in charge and everybody knows it. Even if they do go to somebody else's party, they want to be in charge. Okay. The auditories, when they go to a party, if they go to a party, they're probably going to end up the bartender or sitting next to the bartender just listening to everybody else. Those are the auditories. Why? Because they like to hear people talk. And they don't want to do too much talking. How many times have you heard a banker tell you very much? Very often. They're the auditories.
I got
You have
an earful the other day from a banker that's a client of mine. I said, I heard you crashed your car. And he gave me that whole
Really?
long spiel.
We're gonna talk
the
about
whole
Well,
thing.
that would have
Movie.
been
I really-
visual.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, what happens then when you crash your car? Well, we'll talk about that now. What happens when you crash your car or you have major surgery or something like that? Is you can change patterns. You can change patterns temporarily for just a few minutes, or you can change patterns for the rest of your life. When some small stress problems will just change you for a minute. For instance, some of us know someone who, when they get in a car, just the stress of driving a car, they'll change personalities. Okay. Some of us know somebody who changes dramatically. Hi, Steve. Pick on Steve now.
Yeah.
Pick on Steve. Oh, okay. Now, some of us are that person who changes personalities. Knock it off. Okay. What happens then is your personality is just changed long enough to deal with that stress in the best way you know how. And then, when the stress is over, you may change back. If you have major surgery or when women have babies, things like that, they change their pattern. And sometimes after they've had it, they have what they call postpartum blues or postpartum depression. You've heard of it? Well, sometimes all that is them trying to figure out which pattern they want to land in for the rest of their life. Because they're saying, I'm not really comfortable being a visual anymore. I'm fat, I'm ugly, my hair's a mess, and I don't care. Or, I'm fat, I'm ugly, and I don't really care. Okay? And so they're going through this depression, and that's what it is. Okay? Other things, if you have a client who loses their job or somebody in the family dies or something like that. Those stress situations can change you for life. Or somebody hits midlife, boy, bing, they're 40 years old and they go, oh no. And what happens? They go through middle-age crazies. And not the show, just real life. And
40
they
years
change.
middle age.
Well, that's what my mother told me the last week or so. And, of course, she's well beyond middle age and I'm just a little bit. Anyway, so what happens though is you get into midlife crisis in middle age and you say, something's changing in me physically and in my environment. And the stress of it can make you change patterns from one to another. And sometimes that'll cause a couple of problems. It may cause you to run around on your spouse. It may cause you to just divorce your spouse just because you're sick to death of them. It may cause a lot of things. And maybe they'll divorce you because when you change patterns, you're not the same person anymore. And they can't stand it. And that's it. Get out of here. Okay? So kind of keep in mind. Now, you may change to a different pattern, remember, temporarily or maybe permanent. You may remain that same pattern the rest of your life. And while we're talking about that, I'm going to tell you the story about my dad. When I was a little kid, my dad was a visual. And he always yelled at me, now look at me when I yell at you. Right? Okay? He was very visual. Well, when I got to be older, I was 18, I joined the Army, and I was at Fort Ord. Now, my dad was in the military. He was a colonel in the Army Reserve. And he just happened to be going through Fort Ord. And he was so proud of me standing there in a uniform that he actually kissed me. Now, I was auditory. Now, did I want him to touch me? No. Okay. Later on, before my father died, he changed, for about the last 10 years of his life, he changed to a kinesthetic, and he was always saying, come home, come home. Well, I wasn't home. I had a wife and kids, and that was where my home was. But he wanted me around, wanted to give me hugs when I come in, and I'm going, oh, okay. See, he changed 3 times. He'd been all 3 in his lifetime. Okay. And we do that sometimes. Some people do the exact same situation with my father.
You can hope it.
Well, did we cover parties? I'm not sure.
Parties, yeah.
We didn't finish party.
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't finish party.
Well, we did parties a little bit.
We got
Let's go back
visual and
to parties.
auditory.
The visuals love to go, but they love to host them. The auditories like to stand in the corner, and the kinesthetics, they're having a good time at parties. They're usually the ones that have the most fun. You have fun at parties?
Yeah.
Okay, they don't care. They're just there for the fun. Oh, what a neat life to have fun at parties. You auditories, how to be jealous. Okay,
Humor.
next. That's right. Humor. Visuals humor is sometimes good and sometimes bad. Sometimes they tell good jokes and sometimes they don't. Auditories, sometimes they're really funny. Some of the auditories I've met are the funniest people in the world, but the kinesthetics are the best joke tellers because they get their whole body into it and they're ranting and raving. And I knew this one joke teller auditory in Salt Lake. Remember Rob Sharp, by name only? He would tell the best jokes, but he was an auditory. Okay? He wasn't kinesthetic. And we all thought he was kinesthetic when I started talking about this stuff. Okay.
Music.
Music. Visuals, back to music again. Visuals like,
Videos.
excuse me?
Videos.
Music videos, they do. They like music that has words to it that they can sing along with, doesn't need to necessarily have any meaning. Auditories, they like symphonies again, or jazz, or things that not necessarily have a lot of meaning. They don't always sing along, but they might sing along. Probably not. Usually the visuals you want to sing along. And the kinesthetics like the music that has some feeling to it. Some words, some emotion, some love song, or you picked a fine time to see it, some crying or something like that. They like cowboy music and they love songs. Does that help? Does that fit you not or not?
A little bit.
Okay.
Walking.
Walking. Visuals hate to walk. Where I used to live before I live now, my mailbox was about a block away, and I would, not a block, a couple hundred yards. I would get in a car and drive to my mailbox. Okay. I hated walking. Auditory could take it or leave it. If it's appropriate, they'll walk. If it's inappropriate, then okay. But the kinesthetics love to walk. They walk for hours and hours. They're the ones who like to go for a walk in the mall or to just walk around the neighborhood. And they love walking. My wife's sister, who is the lift operator in Colorado, she comes to visit us, she loves to go for long walks with the kids. And the kids like it. I said, I'm glad she takes it, because I don't want to go. Okay? Stress. How do you deal with stress? Visuals deal with stress by screaming. If you know anybody who's totally visual and you really make them mad, she'll probably yell at you, won't she, Vince?
Yes, you will.
And you'll know right up front that she's upset with you. No question about it. She'll let you know, won't you?
I'm not visual.
I'm not visual, I'm not admitting that, no way. When my kids do something that upset me, I really jump in their face. I mean, they know it, don't they? You've seen me do it.
Yelled at me before.
I have, too. But what happens to visuals? Once they get it out of their system, it's over. They're done and you're still friends again.
Yeah.
Okay, it's no big deal. It's just we had to get it out. Now the auditories, they're gonna hold it in. Right? And this causes some problems later on.
Like ulcers.
Okay, ulcers. Okay, the kinesthetics, they may yell at you, but they'll probably just go up and say, you know, I'm so upset. I'm mad at you and it makes me feel bad. Okay, they're gonna feel worse than you do about it. Okay. Next. Money. Oh, money. This is something everybody likes to talk about. Money. The visuals' money is really important to them. In fact, they can count the dollars in a bank account without a bank statement in front of them. Auditory can't do that. Even though money's real important to them, money is only important to them by the numbers it represents. And they can tell you what's in the bank statement, but they can't tell you where it went or how much went there. A visual could probably do that. But they can tell you the bottom line, they wrote a check, they're at the grocery store, they write a check. They don't just record it, they subtract it right then and there. Auditory, who's an auditory? Do you do that? Do you do that? Okay. Visual's not gonna do that. Visual's gonna write it down and get out of it. Or a kinesthetic's not gonna do that, he's gonna write it down and get out. Well, he might not even write it down. I'll tell you, auditories hate to do the taxes of the kinesthetics because they put their receipts in a shoebox if they save the receipts, and they take the shoebox to their accountant. And they go, figure that out, well, you don't want to go to jail. But money to the kinesthetic is really important, but only in terms of the toys that they can get, or the gratification, or the way it makes them feel later. Money, you know, they're not usually real good salespeople because they're not motivated by money. They're motivated more by the way it makes them feel. If it makes them feel good to make a sale today, they'll make a sale today. If they don't feel like it, then they won't. So they're better managers. Car. Okay, this is something. Now, I love this office because you can see a client when they drive up. You've advertised in the newspaper, and somebody called and they said, I want to go look at this house, and you're going, great. Come on over to the office, meet me here, we'll go look at that house, and you kind of peeking over the divider, and here they come, and you can see what kind of car they drive up in, and you can almost always pick them just like that by their car. This is one you should asterisk, because their car is really important, because this is one of their buying habits. When people buy a car, they will buy a car based on a couple of things. First off, if mom and dad gave it to them,